Last time this season. Welcome to another week of NFL Power Rankings. And this is it. There's only 1 week to go, and then it's going to be playoff content from here on out. So, real quick, make sure to hit that subscribe button at 250. I keep saying it, but that stream will be happening where I bring on all of my subscribers that want to, and they can talk about their football takes. Let's try to hit that before the playoffs start, and let's get into it. At number 32, I have the Tennessee Titans, and their season was filled with QB problems. It was split between Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, and this week they lose to the Jaguars. But luckily for them, they've positioned themselves as currently the top team that needs a quarterback at the second overall pick. So for Tennessee, looking very good as long as they lose their final game versus Houston. The Patriots looked really good against the Bills in Week 16, but fell far from that in Week 17. Drake May had a bit of a concussion issue, which led the Patriots to fall behind by a lot early, and they ended up getting blown out by the Chargers. And for the Patriots, they now occupy the first overall pick in the draft. One loss against the Bills this next week will put them in the spot to be on the clock in April. So for New England, it's honestly just lose this week and you're guaranteed Travis Hunter. So Patriots at 31. At number 30, I have the Cleveland Browns, and this team did not do anything offensively versus the Dolphins. They had DTR in, and he just didn't look that great. But for the Browns, it's lucky that their season is almost over. They play the Ravens on Saturday, and then it'll go into lots of questions. What are they going to do with Deshaun Watson? What are they going to do with many key pieces on this team? And currently sitting at the third overall pick, are they going to draft a quarterback? That's to be seen in the offseason, and I have Cleveland at 30. At number 29, I have the Chicago Bears, and this team has now lost 10 in a row, and that was pretty embarrassing to lose to the Seahawks 6-3, where coaching decisions at the end were puzzling. They were just having terrible clock management, and in this game, their offense just looked terrible. So this offseason, they're going to need to get an offensive coach. I think it's something that's going to reinvigorate this offense and make the Chicago team as competitive as they were to start this season. But for now, the Bears are at 29. At number 28, I have the New Orleans Saints. And for them, this end of the season has been a disaster. Their offense has looked non-existent with Spencer Rattler at the helm. And the Saints also have to make lots of decisions this offseason. This team is in cap hell. And they're going to need to move off key pieces to potentially improve this roster, but I feel like New Orleans is about to start a rebuild, and a high pick is going to help begin that. But for now, New Orleans is lucky that there's only 1 week left in which they play the Buccaneers. They can try to play spoiler, but for them, it's better off to take the higher draft pick. For a second straight week, the team that held the first overall pick going into the week wins. And this week, it's the Giants. And Drew Lock might have set back this Giants franchise multiple years with the best game of his career. He puts up 5 touchdowns. They put up 45 points on the Colts. They end the Colts season, and the Giants get their 3rd win of the year and their 1st win at home. So Giants, very good performance. Malik Neighbors looked like a star, and offensively, it looked pretty productive, which puts Brian Daboll's job into question, because if a shattered Giants offense could do that in a game, what would Daboll be able to work with a good quarterback in the draft? But unfortunately, they might not have the position to take it after this win. So for the Giants, they sit at 27. At 26, I have the Vegas Raiders, and they have now pulled off back-to-back wins and sit at 4-12. This team held the first overall pick 2 weeks ago. Now they hold the 8th overall pick. And it's because the Raiders decided that they were going to play good defensive football. Amir Abdullah has been great for them out of the backfield. He's having a late-season surgence for this Raiders team that desperately needs offensive pieces outside of Brock Bowers. And most importantly, they need a quarterback, and they put themselves out of position to grab one. Look for the Raiders to look to free agency at this point, because that best option will probably be there. So the Raiders are at 26. At number 25, I have the Jaguars, and this team pulls off the win at home against the Titans, in which they won their 4th game of the year, Brian Thomas continues to look great for this Jaguars team. It looks like that first-round pick was well worth it for this Jaguars team. And now they head into an offseason after they play the Colts this week, and where there's a lot of questions. A potential coaching change is happening. I wonder who's going to take that Jacksonville job because it is enticing. There is pieces there. You have Trevor Lawrence, who's going to come back fresh next year and hopefully play as good as he did a couple years ago, as well as Brian Thomas, a backfield of Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. This is a very enticing job if Doug Peterson gets fired. But for now, the Jaguars, with 1 week to go, they sit at 25. At number 24, I have the New York Jets, and this team got absolutely blown out this past week. They were down 40-0. Aaron Rodgers benches himself, and they only put up 14 points on the board, and when it didn't even matter anyway. And the Jets lose this game in blowout fashion to their division rival. So in what's been a nightmare season for the Jets, they only have 1 week to go in what could potentially be Aaron Rodgers' final game of his career. It is a decorated career, and it could end with ending a Dolphins season, and very wish the Dolphins are still in play. But for the Jets, this team is falling apart. The offseason is going to be about maintaining those key pieces that might want out at this point. So the Jets are at 24. At number 23, we have the 49ers, and they played in a shootout on Monday night against the Lions, but they ultimately fell short. Brock Purdy got hurt in the game and will not play in their season finale. They'll roll out Josh Dobbs against the Cardinals in a game that does not matter. Both teams are eliminated. But for the 49ers, injuries was what ruined this season. This Niners team did not have McCaffrey for 75% of the season, and they didn't have many of their main offensive pieces for 75% of the season. So this Niners team just has to maintain that roster that brought them to the Super Bowl a year ago, and next season, in which they have a fourth-place schedule that's looking pretty easy, could be a great one for San Francisco. So they sit at 23. Carolina sits at 22, and this team lost in blowout fashion, but I'm just liking their upside. They played a competitive game early on where Bryce Young was making some key plays, but it ended up being that the Buccaneers wanted more. They had more to play for, and the Panthers really are just getting reps for their starting quarterback and the pieces around him. So Carolina ends the season with the Falcons with a chance to end the Falcons season by beating them, but Carolina, their focus is on the future. I think they're going to go after a piece in the draft, like a wide receiver, to assist Bryce Young in what is a very winnable NFC South next season. But for Carolina, we've liked their improvement down the stretch, and let's see some more of it in Week 18. Next up, I have the Arizona Cardinals, and this team just did not put up enough points to beat the Rams in a game that they were already eliminated, but Kyler Murray and that offense is going to be a question this offseason. Is there going to be stuff done to better this offense, or are they going to move some pieces off? Because this Cardinals team is in a weird space where they're not good enough to be a playoff team, but they're not good enough to tank, or not bad enough to tank. And the Cardinals, we're going to see what they could do. They finished the season at San Francisco this week, and what could be a good game between two teams that don't really have anything to play for. But for now, Arizona, they'll finish third in the NFC West, and their season ends with a losing record this season. A heartbreaking loss for the Indianapolis Colts, and it's beginning to become a tradition for this team. The last couple years, it's been in the last few weeks of the season where this team has blown either leads, they've blown a playoff spot, and in this situation, they lost to a team that had 2 wins going into the game, to a quarterback that has not shown anything productive for most of this season, and now the Colts will be watching the playoffs from home. And this season has been telling of what the future is. They don't really know. And Anthony Richardson is going to be a topic of debate. Do the Colts roll back with him? I think they do, but they have to bring in another guy like a Joe Flacco that can back him up and come in and win football games if Anthony Richardson is hurt. And the Colts, there's going to be changes in this organization because finishing 8-9 or 9-8 every year is not going to cut it. So the Colts are out of the playoffs, and they sit at number 20. At number 19, I have the Dallas Cowboys, and this team lost heavily to their division rival in the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles clinched the division with the win. But for the Cowboys, Their improvement down the stretch has been kind of impressive. I've liked what I've seen out of them, except this past week. And for the Cowboys, are they going to keep Mike McCarthy? I don't know. I think he's done a good enough job to get an extension, but many fans want him fired. And what does Dallas do in terms of the draft? Are they going to go running back, even though Rico Dowdle has shown some potential? And are they going to draft an Ashton Genty? We'll see. And that's why Dallas is at 19. At number 18, I have the Seattle Seahawks. And this team, unfortunately, they won, but they're out of the playoffs. They'll finish with a winning record. They're currently 9-7, but their game against the Rams this weekend will mean nothing. And the Seahawks, the last 2 years, have finished 9-8, and they're in a similar position to the Colts. They've been right around the picture the last couple of years, but they've never fielded a team good enough to win it all. And Seattle, they have an offensive structure. Kenneth Walker, when he's healthy, is huge, even though Zach Charbonnet has been playing pretty well in his place. JSN had a breakout season, and we'll see what we get out of him and DK Metcalf in that receiver room. Devon Witherspoon was a Pro Bowler, so there's pieces here for the Seahawks to compete. Just will they, and is Geno Smith the guy to lead a competing team, is what we'll figure out this offseason with the Seahawks. So I have them at number 18. At number 17, I have the Miami Dolphins. Tua didn't play their game, but they remain alive. They beat the Browns, and this week they have a potential to get in the playoffs when everybody thought they were dead earlier in the season. They just need a win, and they need the Chiefs' backups to beat the Denver Broncos. And for Miami, they play the Jets. It's a team they've beaten before this season, and even though they might not get Tua back for this game, you have Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, that high-powered offense could potentially take Miami to the playoffs in surprising fashion. They would visit Buffalo. I don't know how that would go, but Miami still being in contention in Week 18, despite what we saw in the first half of the season when they didn't have Tua, is kind of amazing, and it shows how good this Miami team has truly been. At number 16, I have the Atlanta Falcons, and this team lost to the Commanders on Sunday night in a very great game, but they saw improvement out of Michael Penix. He looked very good for the Falcons, and now they're sitting in Week 18 with needing a Saints team to beat the Buccaneers, and they need to beat the Panthers to get in as the NFC South champions, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but for Atlanta, there's going to be a lot of talk about this team because it is very talented on paper, but you have pieces like Kyle Pitts being underwhelming, but it seems like Michael Penix might be the guy, and he showed that on Sunday night against the Commanders. And the Falcons still remain in playoff contention, although their chances might be small. The Houston Texans just do not look good whatsoever, and Christmas Day showed it. They didn't score a single offensive point. They put up 2 points because of a safety, and they get blown out by the Ravens. So in what was a stretch that was supposed to see if the Texans could compete, we kind of learned that they can't. And it's sad because the pieces were there, just injury struck this team, and the Texans will go into the playoffs depleted, but they'll host a playoff game, and if they can get a win, who knows what can happen from there. They'll either be playing the Steelers, Chargers, or Ravens, and in my opinion, the way it's looking out, it's going to be the Chargers, and the Texans can win that game. It's just, will C.J. Stroud play good enough with what he has around him to win a game? And I think it relies heavily on Joe Mixon as well. But for now, Houston sits at number 15. 2 weeks ago, it looked like the Broncos were almost a lock for the playoffs. And in that first half against the Chargers in Week 16, it looked like they were pretty damn close. But after blowing a lead in the second half, and then this past week, the Broncos are a loss away from likely missing the playoffs. And it relies on them beating the Chiefs, a team that they haven't beat much in recent years, to get in. And Denver, this game they played was unbelievable. Them and Cincinnati went blow for blow, and Bo Nix had some of the greatest throws I've ever seen in this game. So Bo Nix is obviously that guy. But the defense played solid, but it needs to get back to that form we saw earlier in the season where this team was almost letting up barely any points per game. But Denver, if they get into the playoffs, they're going to be scary, and the offensive plays between Bo Nix and Marvin Mims showed that on Saturday. So Denver sits at 14. Similarly to the Texans, the Steelers have just shown why they're not a competitor in the AFC over their last stretch of games. Christmas Day, they got blown out by the Chiefs. Before that, blown out by the Ravens. So two of the top teams of the AFC, and they lost by multiple possessions. The Steelers team has fallen heavily. They've lost 3 in a row. I know they've played tough teams, but they have to get a win or two out of that because this team is going to head into the playoffs with bad momentum. And the only way to save that is by ending the Bengals season on Saturday night and beating them. And the offense needs to restart itself and start moving the ball the way they were a couple weeks back before this slide began. And Pittsburgh, they're either going to be the AFC North champion if they get some luck from Cleveland, or they're going to be the 5 or 6 seed. So let's see what Pittsburgh can do in the playoffs. But for now, I'm not very confident in them. 8-8 team is looking insane, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. They played out of their mind offensively on Saturday. T. Higgins was huge in the win. Jamar Chase, he went kind of below the radar because he didn't score a touchdown, but he had over 100 yards. Joe Burrow had over 400 yards, and the defense made the stops in overtime that they needed to, and Cincinnati is still alive going into the last week. It's going to take some miracles, which include the Chiefs backups beating the Broncos, as well as a 4-12 Jets team beating the Dolphins. But if Cincinnati wins and those two things happen, they'll be in the playoffs. And trust me, teams are scared of Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is going to be extremely dangerous if they just get it. And that's the biggest priority for Cincinnati right now, but I have them at 12. Tampa Bay gets the win over Carolina. I've moved them up to number 11, and they are now just one win against a Saints team from making the playoffs as NFC South champions once again. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, that connection was crazy in this one against the Panthers. They combined for multiple touchdowns, over 100 yards, and Baker throws for 5 touchdowns, over 300 yards. So almost perfect day out of Baker, and that's what you need to see this time of year. Considering this Bucs team went to the divisional last year, there's high expectations here if they do get in. And it just begins with getting the win in Week 18 and locking up that playoff spot. But Tampa's a team that is going to go under the radar. Many people are not going to pick them to win a game, but Tampa is definitely a team to watch down the stretch here. So Tampa at number 11. The LA Rams are still flying high. They clinched the NFC West with a 10-6 record, and this Rams team has been unbelievable to end the year. They're 9-2 since starting 1-4, and although they haven't been scoring points, they've been winning football games. They've allowed 9 points in back-to-back weeks, which shows how good this defense is. We know what their offense could do because this team outdueled the Buffalo Bills, one of the best offenses in the league, and this Rams team is very scary. If they end up being the 3 seed, then that 6 seed, whether it be the Commanders or the Packers, are going to be scared of this Rams team. And the Rams are definitely a team to watch because they could be a sneaky Super Bowl dark horse in the postseason. So LA at number 10. At number 9, I have the LA Chargers. They clinched the playoff spot with that win over the Patriots, where their offense went off. Ladd McConkey is incredible for this Chargers team. What a pick in the second round by the Chargers. Their first-round pick, Joe Alt, he makes such a difference on the offensive line. Justin Herbert is playing the best football he's honestly ever played since his rookie year, and this might even be even better because I truly believe that this Chargers team was not going to do much this season, and they've proved me completely wrong. And now the Chargers are a team that could easily upset a team in the playoffs because this Chargers team is talented enough to do so. They'll be the 5 or 6, and let's see what happens with the LA Chargers. At the 8, the Green Bay Packers are there. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings in a game where they just got beat up early on. They came back and made it very close at the end, but Green Bay is now going to be the 6 or the 7 in the NFC. And if they're the 7, that sets up a matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. In this game, the offense just did not do enough early on. Jordan Love had, I think, 60 passing yards going into the fourth quarter. That's just not enough to beat a good team like the Vikings. And Defensively, this team just needs to get healthy in the secondary, get healthy linebacker-wise, and this team is going to be very good in the playoffs. It's just getting healthy and potentially having to beat the teams that they lost to this season. So the Packers sit at 8. The Washington Commanders are at number 7, and Jaden Daniels is playing the most clutch football I've seen for a rookie quarterback. He just continues to deliver in key moments, and the Commanders needed him in this one, and he makes the second half comeback. He scores in overtime and sends his team to the postseason for the first time in a couple years. The defense locked down in key moments, but they could improve. We've seen their potential this season. They are a solid unit. Their offense, though, is scary. And this Commanders team has the potential to go on a deep run, I think. And they are another dark horse in the NFC. And I'll say it, this NFC field is very stacked. But for the Commanders, they sit at number 7. The Baltimore Ravens sit at number 6. They are 1 win away from clinching the 3 seed and the AFC North. And they play a Browns team that only has 3 wins. So I think the Ravens are going to get it done. This team had the most Pro Bowlers in the league this year. They had 9, which it looks great for them. This team is very talented. And Lamar just continues to raise that MVP resume against the Texans on Christmas. He just looked crazy. And if Lamar wins his 3rd MVP, we have to start considering Lamar as one of the best quarterbacks of this generation if he isn't already. And so for the Ravens, definitely a Super Bowl contender, definitely a team I can see hoisting it in New Orleans, and I have them at number 6. At number 5, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, and they lock up the division with the win over the Dallas Cowboys. They had Tanner McKee and Kenny Pickett both play snaps in this game. Jalen Hurts is out right now, but luckily for them, they're locked into the 2 seed. They have nothing to play for in Week 18, so they'll be resting their starters. Saquon won't get the record. He had over 2,000 yards this season, so what a season and what a signing by the Eagles. He's truly elevated this Eagles team to the next level, and let's see what this Eagles team can do in the playoffs, because I think they're the best team in the NFC when fully healthy. The Minnesota Vikings are on a roll again, and still, this team lost 2 games the whole season so far, and they were back-to-back in the middle of the season. The Vikings have won a lot of games, and it continued this week. Sam Darnold played the best game of his career, and the way he's playing right now, this Vikings team could easily win their first Super Bowl in franchise history, and it begins with locking up that 1 seed. If they can get that first-round bye and get home games at US Bank Stadium, this Vikings team is going to be probably a Super Bowl favorite. So the Vikings, very big game for them. If they get it done, the Vikings are looking very, very good to possibly lift the Lombardi Trophy. It took Kansas City a little while to play their most convincing football game of the season, but they did, and it comes in Week 17 against the Steelers. They just looked really good. Their offense was moving, and for the rest of the league, this is a bad sign. Kansas City just turns it up at this time of year, and we've seen what they can do. They've won 2 Super Bowls in a row, and they're looking for a 3-peat. They're going to have the first-round bye, and whoever comes into Arrowhead in the second round is going to be scared because this Chiefs team is a monster, and with Mahomes, the way he plays in the playoffs, this Chiefs team is easily on par to potentially win a 3rd in a row. At number 2, I have the Detroit Lions, and the offense just continues to deliver another 40-point game. They had a great play where Jamison Williams scored on a bit of a hook and ladder play, and this Lions team is offensively super elite. My concern about them is their defense. They've been very banged up the entire year, and if their defense can hold up against the Vikings, they are going to get a key bye week for their defense to rest up and potentially get big pieces back for a divisional round where they'll have home advantage through the playoffs. It just starts with beating the Minnesota Vikings to clinch that 1 seed and clinch the NFC North. But Detroit offensively are incredible. Still at number 1, I have the Buffalo Bills, and they showed it this past week. They blow out the New York Jets, improved to 13-3. They clinched the 2 seed, and Josh Allen just continues to create that MVP resume that Is it enough at this point? Because Josh Allen does not have to play in the last week. The Bills already know what they're doing. They'll be hosting a game at home in Buffalo against either the Broncos, Dolphins, or Bengals. And this Buffalo team, if they can win one or two games and get their crack at Kansas City, I think they have a very good chance of beating them in the playoffs for the first time, because this Buffalo team is special. And I've seen that since the beginning of the season. They've beaten all the teams at the top. It's just Buffalo. If they get in their own way, that's the only way that I don't see this Buffalo team going far. So Buffalo at number 1. And that's going to do it for the final power rankings of the regular season. I'll see you guys for playoff content. Make sure to stay tuned. I'm going to have a lot of videos coming out. So make sure like and subscribe, turn on those notifications, and I'll see you in the next video.